You can't fake who you are forever, he whispered to himself, watching her from across the street. Vincent Marino, the man who ran the city, the Mafia boss feared by all, stood hidden in the shadows. But tonight, he was playing a different game. The woman walking down the street was not just another face. Emily Carson, the waitress with the kind eyes, the one who gave without asking for anything in return, had caught his attention. He had been testing her for weeks, pretending to be someone he wasn't, just to see if she would see through his disguise. He wasn't a man to be vulnerable, but with Emily, he found himself wondering if he could be. She had no idea who he really was, nor did she know the life he led, the power he held. For her, he was just another regular guy, a struggling man with a story to tell. The only thing she saw in him was the man who needed help. The thing was, he wasn't helpless. Not at all. He was just waiting for the right moment to reveal his true self. Vincent's heart raced as he watched her laugh with the old man in the cafe. There was something about her that made him feel something other than the cold indifference he usually carried. She smiled at everyone, even when she didn't have to. She was kind, real, and that was something Vincent hadn't seen in a long time. As she stepped out of the cafe, Vincent moved, his steps silent against the wet pavement. He was close now, close enough to smell the coffee on her clothes, to feel the warmth she unknowingly radiated. She was just a few steps ahead when he called out. "Hey, Emily." She stopped, her shoulders stiffened as she turned, the surprise on her face replaced by a slight frown. "Yes?" she asked, the words soft, almost cautious. Vincent stepped closer, watching her eyes flicker with uncertainty. "I know this might sound strange, but I need to tell you something." He paused, watching her carefully. "I'm not who I said I was." She blinked, confusion sweeping over her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a little shaky now. He smiled, the charm he had perfected over the years working its magic, though this time, it felt different. "The truth is, Emily, I'm not some broke guy trying to get by. I'm someone much more complicated." Her expression shifted, uncertainty mixing with a hint of fear. "What are you talking about?" she asked again, her gaze searching his face for any signs of deception. Vincent stepped forward again, his voice lowering. "I've been testing you. Watching you. To see if someone like me could find someone like you." Emily looked at him, her confusion growing. "Why?" she asked, still unsure what he was getting at. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black card, sliding it into her hand. "Because you've passed the test. You've been kind, honest, real, things I didn't think existed anymore." Her eyes widened slightly as she stared at the card. "What is this?" she whispered, still not fully understanding. "A way into my world," he said simply, his gaze intense. She looked up at him, the pieces starting to come together, but the fear still lingered. She didn't know whether to run or stay. But she didn't run. Not yet. She stared at him, uncertainty clouding her judgment. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Vincent smiled, his cold eyes softening for just a second. "I want to see if you can handle the truth. If you can handle me." Emily stood there, her hand still holding the black card he had given her. She wasn't sure whether to laugh, cry, or run. Everything about Vincent Marino screamed danger, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her pause. He wasn't just some random guy. He wasn't the man she thought he was. "You've been testing me?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Vincent gave a small nod, his face unreadable. "I had to be sure," he said. "I needed to know if you could handle the truth. If you could handle me." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from him. She had been kind to him. She had helped him, treated him like a person, not a mystery. And now, it seemed like everything had changed. "What happens now?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Vincent didn't immediately respond. Instead, he took a step closer, closing the distance between them. His presence was overwhelming, but it wasn't threatening. It was just intense. He looked down at her, his piercing gaze never leaving her face. "Now," he said slowly, "you decide." Emily frowned. "Decide what?" she asked, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "Whether you want to be a part of my world. Whether you can handle it." Vincent's voice softened slightly, but there was still an edge to it. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The Mafia world. She had heard of it, of course. Everyone had. It was a world of power, of control, of danger. But she had never imagined she would be thrust into it. "You think I can just walk away?" she asked, her voice trembling. Vincent shook his head. "I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to stay. To be a part of it." Emily took a step back, her mind racing. She couldn't just jump into something like this, could she? She didn't know the first thing about the Mafia, about what Vincent's world truly meant. But one thing was clear, he wasn't like anyone she had ever met before. There was a sincerity in his words, a raw honesty that made her question everything she thought she knew. She had already been drawn to him, in ways she couldn't explain. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said, more to herself than to him. Vincent's expression softened. "You don't have to be ready," he said, his voice gentle. "You just have to trust me." The words hit her like a wave, washing over her with a force she didn't expect. Trust him. Could she? Could she trust a man like him, someone who lived in a world so different from her own? Emily didn't know. But the pull she felt toward him was undeniable. She swallowed hard, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "And if I don't trust you?" she asked. Vincent stepped even closer, his eyes intense, searching hers. "Then you walk away," he said simply. "But once you're in, there's no going back. You'll be mine. And I'll protect you, no matter what." Emily stared at him, the weight of his words settling over her. She had never been a woman to jump into anything without thinking it through. But there was something about Vincent, something about the way he spoke. The way he made her feel seen in a world that often overlooked her. "I don't know if I can handle this," she whispered. Vincent smiled, a slow, almost imperceptible smile that made her heart race. "You won't know until you try," he said, his voice low and inviting. The air between them crackled with tension, and Emily knew that her life was about to change forever. Whether she was ready or not. Emily stood there, her breath shallow as Vincent's words echoed in her mind. The decision he was asking her to make was not one she could take lightly. She had always prided herself on being cautious, never rushing into anything without knowing the full story. But there was something about this man that made her question everything. Vincent wasn't just any man, he was powerful, dangerous even, and yet, he was standing here, offering her a life she had never even dreamed of. "I need time," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent studied her for a moment, his gaze intense and unwavering. "Take all the time you need," he replied, his voice calm but with an undertone that made it clear he wouldn't wait forever. He turned to leave, but then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Just remember, Emily, when you're ready, I'll be here. And once you step into my world, there's no turning back." His words lingered in the air, leaving a weight that felt too heavy for her to carry alone. She watched him disappear into the night, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Could she really trust him? Could she live in a world so far removed from her own? She had always believed in love, but this was something different. It wasn't just about affection or companionship. It was about power, loyalty, and a world she could barely comprehend. The days that followed were a blur. Emily found herself lost in thought more often than not, replaying every moment with Vincent. His intensity, his charm, and the way he seemed to see right through her. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. There was a part of her that wanted to dive in head first, to embrace whatever this was, to let him show her a side of life she never knew existed. But another part of her, the part that had always been practical and cautious, was terrified. She had never been the type to jump into something blindly. But as she sat in her small apartment that night, the weight of the decision pressing down on her, she realized something. Vincent had given her a choice. He hadn't forced her. He hadn't pressured her. And in that moment, Emily knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't keep pretending that she wasn't drawn to him. She couldn't keep denying the connection that had been building between them. Slowly, she stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The world outside seemed so vast, so full of possibilities. But could she really step into that world? Could she embrace the unknown, or would she turn her back on it all? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was. Vincent had shown her a glimpse of something more. And that something more was a chance at a life she never thought possible. Emily closed her eyes, her mind made up. The next time she saw Vincent, she would have an answer. And she was ready to face whatever came next. The next day, Emily found herself standing outside the sleek, black car that had arrived at her apartment. The cold air nipped at her skin, but it wasn't the chill that made her nervous. It was the weight of the decision she had made. She was about to meet Vincent again, and this time, she wasn't going to back away. She was going to face whatever this was head-on. She took a deep breath and stepped into the car, the door closing softly behind her. The driver didn't say a word as they drove through the city, the familiar streets passing by in a blur. Emily's mind was racing. She couldn't believe she was doing this. But she also couldn't deny the pull Vincent had on her. The way he made her feel seen, understood, even when she didn't fully understand him. She had to know more. She had to understand his world, even if it terrified her. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally stopped in front of a tall, modern building. It was luxurious, but not in an obvious, flashy way. It was the kind of building that screamed power without saying a word. Emily's heart skipped a beat as the door opened, and she was led inside. The lobby was grand, but it wasn't the kind of grand she was used to. It was subtle, understated. There was an elegance to everything, from the marble floors to the art hanging on the walls. She followed the man who had opened the door for her, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As they reached the elevator, Emily felt her nerves rise again. What was she doing here? What kind of world was she about to step into? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and they stepped inside. Vincent was waiting for her on the other side, standing with his usual air of confidence. He looked as impeccable as ever, his suit sharp, his expression unreadable. But when his eyes met hers, she saw something different, a flicker of something softer, something warmer. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but with an undertone that made her heart race. "I'm glad you came." She nodded, trying to calm her nerves. "I made my decision," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." Vincent stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the best way. "Good," he said, his eyes intense as he studied her. "But know this, once you're in, there's no turning back. You're a part of my world now, and I'll protect you with everything I have." Emily swallowed hard. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. She had already known that this was a decision she couldn't take lightly, but now, hearing it from him, it felt real. "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I just want to understand. I want to know who you really are." Vincent smiled, a small, genuine smile that softened his features. "You'll get your chance. Welcome to my world, Emily." He turned and gestured for her to follow him, and she did. As they walked deeper into the building, Emily's mind was filled with 1,000 questions. But one thing was clear, her life was never going to be the same. She had crossed a line, and now, there was no going back. As they walked through the sleek hallways, Vincent's presence was like a shadow that wrapped itself around her. Emily had never felt more out of place, yet strangely, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be. The further they went, the more the building seemed to pulse with power, each step echoing on the polished floors, every room they passed holding an air of quiet authority. Vincent led her into a large office at the end of the hallway. The room was minimalistic, but everything in it screamed wealth and control. There was no clutter, no unnecessary decoration, just everything in its right place. Vincent motioned for her to sit across from his desk. His gaze never left her as he took his seat. "So, now that you're here, let's talk about what this means," he said, his voice calm but with a weight that made her heart skip a beat. Emily sat down, the chair feeling cold beneath her. "I don't know what you expect from me," she said quietly, though she had a feeling she knew exactly what he meant. She had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. Vincent leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. "I expect loyalty. Trust. And your understanding that you're part of something much bigger than you ever imagined. This world, the one I'm a part of, it's not kind to those who can't handle it." Emily's stomach twisted. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. "I'm not like you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't belong here." Vincent's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained intense. "That's the point, Emily. You're not like me, but that's what makes you valuable." He paused, letting his words settle in the space between them. "You bring something to this world that no one else does." Emily didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't sure what she brought to the table. She wasn't sure she even belonged here, in this place, with Vincent and his world of power and danger. "And what happens now?" she asked, her voice small. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk. "Now, you get to decide how far you're willing to go," he said. "You've seen enough to understand that there's no turning back. You're in, whether you like it or not. But the question is, how much are you willing to risk?" Emily took a deep breath. She didn't know if she was ready for this, for everything that came with being part of his world. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way he made her feel like she mattered in a way no one else ever had. "I'm here," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'll do what I can." Vincent's lips curled into a small smile, but there was something dark behind it. "Good," he said. "Because once you're with me, you're mine. And I protect what's mine." The weight of his words hung in the air, a promise, and a warning. Emily wasn't sure if she was ready for everything that came with those words, but she knew one thing for sure: her life had just changed, and there was no turning back. Emily sat in the luxurious penthouse, the soft hum of the city below serving as a constant reminder that her life had irrevocably changed. Vincent had taken her into his world, and there was no going back. She had no idea what to expect next, but one thing was clear: she was not the same woman who had stepped into his office just days ago. Vincent had shown her the depths of his power, the wealth he controlled, and the ruthlessness that came with it. But what caught her off guard was the way he treated her, always kind, always thoughtful, as if she mattered in a world that didn't seem to care. Still, doubt lingered in her mind. Could she truly belong in this world? Was she ready to handle everything that came with it? She couldn't escape the weight of Vincent's promise, the one he had made clear from the very beginning: once she was with him, she was his, and he would protect her. It sounded simple, but the implications were anything but. As she paced the floor of the penthouse, the grand windows revealing the lights of the city stretching endlessly before her, she couldn't help but feel the pull of something deeper. It wasn't just the power that Vincent commanded. It was the way he looked at her, as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. And that was both comforting and terrifying. "Emily," Vincent's voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She turned to find him standing in the doorway of the room, his expression unreadable. He had been quiet all evening, something that was unusual for him. He crossed the room toward her, his footsteps measured, deliberate. "You've been quiet," he observed, his eyes searching hers. She hesitated before responding, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just thinking." Vincent raised an eyebrow, his gaze intense. "About what?" "About everything," she said, her hands fidgeting nervously. "This life, this world you live in. I'm not sure I'm cut out for it." Vincent took a step closer, his presence enveloping her. He didn't say anything for a moment, just studied her, as if weighing her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. You don't have to be like me to be part of my world. But you do need to trust me." Emily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle on her chest. "I do trust you," she said, almost in disbelief, though the uncertainty still lingered. "But it's not just about trust, is it?" she added quietly. Vincent smiled slightly, his eyes softening. "No, it's not just about trust. It's about understanding what you're willing to sacrifice for what you want. For what we want." She felt her heart race at the unspoken meaning behind his words. Was she ready for this? Ready to dive into a world she barely understood, a world where there were no guarantees? But as she looked at Vincent, standing before her, his gaze never wavering, something inside her clicked. She didn't know if she was ready, but she knew she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything he had shown her. "I'm not sure what's ahead," she said softly, "but I'm willing to find out." Vincent reached out, gently taking her hand. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. Emily nodded, feeling a sense of resolve build within her. She might not have all the answers, but one thing was certain, she was in this now, and there was no turning back. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind, each day blending into the next as Emily tried to adjust to her new life. Vincent was always there, his presence as constant as the city's hum below their penthouse. He introduced her to his world slowly, making sure she understood the rules, the boundaries, and the people who would either make her or break her. It wasn't easy. The world of power, money, and influence was unlike anything Emily had ever known. But she could feel herself changing, adapting to the rhythm of it all. The business meetings, the long nights spent in Vincent's office, and the occasional gala where she had to play the part of the perfect companion. But the more she learned, the more she realized how much she didn't know. One evening, as they sat together in the lavish living room overlooking the city, Vincent turned to her, his expression serious. "You're not just with me, Emily. You're part of this. You need to be ready for the consequences of that." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily looked at him, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are people who won't like the fact that you're here. People who think they should be in your place," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You'll have to be strong. You can't show weakness." Emily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had already seen the way some of Vincent's associates looked at her, sizing her up, evaluating her every move. But she wasn't sure if she was strong enough for what was coming. "I don't want to be part of all of this," she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "I just want to be with you." Vincent's expression softened, and he reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "I know," he said, his voice low. "But this isn't just about us anymore. It's about everything I've built. And now, you're part of it." Emily looked down at their intertwined hands, trying to process what he was saying. She had known this wasn't going to be simple, but hearing it from him made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Vincent's grip tightened slightly, his gaze steady. "You don't have to be ready, Emily. You just have to trust me. I'll protect you, but you need to understand that you're not just mine. You're part of something much bigger than yourself now." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. She had already crossed a line, and there was no going back. But she wasn't sure if she was prepared for everything that came with it. The power, the danger, the people who would try to tear her down. But Vincent had made it clear that this was her choice. She could walk away or stay and face what came next. And despite the fear creeping into her chest, she knew she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Okay, she said finally, her voice steadying. I'll stay. Vincent smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Good. Because now, we do this together. The following days were a blur of meetings, events, and decisions that Emily didn't fully understand. But Vincent was always by her side, guiding her through the maze of his world with quiet authority. He never pushed her, never rushed her, but she could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had stepped into a life she wasn't prepared for, but she had made her choice. Vincent had made it clear that he would protect her, but she wasn't sure if that would be enough. She spent long hours in the penthouse, learning the ins and outs of the business, meeting people who didn't hesitate to test her, to see if she was worthy of being in Vincent's world. But what she didn't expect was how isolated she would feel. The more she learned, the more she realized how little she truly knew. Vincent was a man of few words when it came to his past, and Emily couldn't help but wonder what had shaped him into the person he was today. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows, Emily couldn't hold back any longer. Vincent, she said, her voice tentative. He looked up from the papers he was going through, his expression softening when he saw the look on her face. What is it? He asked, his tone gentle. I need to know more about you, she said, her heart pounding. I don't understand how you became who you are. I need to know what I'm a part of. Vincent set the papers down, his gaze shifting to something far off, as if he were thinking about something long buried. He didn't speak for a long moment, and Emily felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. You don't have to know everything, he finally said, his voice low. But I understand why you're asking. Emily met his eyes, searching for answers. I'm not asking for the details of everything. But I need to know the truth, Vincent. I need to understand what I've walked into. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. My world is not for everyone, he said slowly. It's a world of power, of control. It's a world where trust is earned, not given. And I've built it all from nothing. His voice had a hard edge, and Emily could feel the weight of his words settle in her chest. I don't want to be part of a world like that, she said softly. But I want to be with you. Vincent's eyes softened, but there was a glimmer of something else in them, something darker. Then you'll have to accept that this is who I am, he said, his voice steady. I've worked for everything I have. I've fought for everything. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing Vincent speak with such conviction made her realize just how deep this world ran. I want to understand you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I want to be a part of your life. Vincent stood and walked over to her, his presence commanding yet comforting. He knelt down in front of her, his hand gently cupping her chin. You already are, he said, his voice soft but firm. And you always will be. But you need to trust me, Emily. This life isn't something you can step into without fully understanding what it means. You'll be tested. You'll be pushed. But if you're with me, I'll never let you fall. Emily looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. She didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, she realized something. No matter how difficult it would be, no matter how much she feared it, she wasn't ready to walk away. She was in this now. And there was no turning back. The days passed quickly, and Emily found herself more deeply entrenched in Vincent's world than she ever imagined possible. He had kept his word, he protected her, guiding her through the complex world of business and influence he controlled. But as she became more involved, the challenges of that world began to weigh on her. There were constant meetings, briefings, and people who tested her, watching her every move, wondering if she was worthy of being Vincent's partner. And yet, through it all, there was a strange comfort in knowing that Vincent was always there, by her side, watching over her with a quiet intensity. It wasn't a life she had ever imagined for herself, but with each passing day, she felt herself growing into it. It was one late evening, after another long meeting, when Emily found herself standing in front of Vincent's office, unsure of what to do next. She had been grappling with her emotions for weeks now, torn between the woman she had been before and the woman she was becoming. She had come a long way since that first day in the penthouse, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Vincent had given her everything, his trust, his protection, his world, but Emily still felt like an outsider at times. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but tonight, the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, Vincent appeared in the doorway, his sharp gaze softening when he saw her. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of concern. "You're here late." She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of him. He was always so composed, so confident, but tonight, there was something different in his eyes. "I was just thinking," she said quietly, unsure of how to put her thoughts into words. Vincent stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "About what?" he asked. "About everything," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "About us. About this life. I don't know if I can keep up with all of it. I don't know if I belong here." Vincent's eyes softened, and for a moment, Emily could see the vulnerability behind the man who had built an empire. "Emily," he said gently, his hand reaching for hers. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to figure everything out today. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking you to be with me, to trust me, and to let me help you when you need it." His words were simple, but they held so much weight. Emily's heart ached as she looked into his eyes, the man who had shown her a side of herself she hadn't known existed. "I want to trust you," she whispered. "I do. But sometimes, I'm not sure I can handle everything." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her close as if he could protect her from the weight of the world. "You don't have to handle it all alone," he said softly. "I'm here. And I will always be here. But you need to understand something, Emily. This world is not for the faint of heart. It will challenge you, push you, but if you stand by my side, we will face it together." She closed her eyes, taking in his words, feeling the sincerity behind them. She didn't have all the answers, but with Vincent by her side, she felt like she could find her way. "I'm with you," she said quietly, her voice filled with determination. Vincent smiled, a small but meaningful gesture that spoke volumes. "That's all I need to hear," he said. "Now, let's face the world together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences for Emily. Vincent kept his promise to protect her, and she saw more of his world than she ever thought possible. The power, the money, and the constant presence of people who seemed to watch her every move. But despite everything, she felt the weight of Vincent's world slowly becoming her own. It wasn't always easy, but she could see how much it meant to him. He didn't just want her by his side for convenience. He wanted her there, with him, in every way. And the more she learned about him, the more she realized how much he truly cared for her. One night, as they sat in the living room, Vincent turned to her, his expression serious. "Emily," he began, his voice steady, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. Vincent hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There are people who don't like the fact that you're with me," he said, his tone a little colder. "People who would do anything to see you walk away. To see me lose everything." Emily's heart clenched at the weight of his words. She had already known that his world came with risks, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. "I won't let anyone hurt you," Vincent continued, his gaze intense. "But you need to be prepared. There will be challenges. There will be tests." Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. "What kind of tests?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vincent's eyes softened, and he reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "The kind that make you question everything. Your place in this world. Your place beside me," he said. "But I need you to trust me. Trust that I will always protect you, no matter what." Emily looked at him, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had already trusted him with so much, but this was different. This wasn't just about love. This was about the world he lived in, and the dangers that came with it. "I trust you," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. "But I don't know if I'm ready for everything that's coming." Vincent smiled softly, his thumb brushing over her hand. "You don't have to be ready," he said. "You just have to trust that we'll face it together. No matter what comes next." Emily nodded slowly, the uncertainty still lingering, but something inside her shifted. She had made her choice. She had decided to stay, to be with Vincent, no matter what challenges lay ahead. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "I'm with you." Vincent leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "And I'm with you," he whispered. "Always." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the future hanging between them, but for the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to face it, as long as they faced it together. The next few days were filled with tension as Vincent's world continued to encroach upon Emily's, the line between them growing thinner with each passing moment. She had chosen to stand by his side, to face whatever challenges awaited them, but the reality of what that meant was settling in. The more time she spent in his world, the more she saw the dangers that came with it. Vincent had been right, there were people who didn't want her there. There were whispers and sideways glances from those around her, people who had made it clear they didn't think she belonged. But it wasn't just the people outside that made her uneasy. It was the constant pressure of Vincent's expectations, the weight of being part of something so much bigger than herself. She had never been one to shy away from challenges, but this felt different. This was a world that wasn't just about power or money. It was about survival. And she wasn't sure she was ready to fight for her place in it. One evening, after another long day of meetings and events, Emily found herself standing in the penthouse, staring out over the city. The lights below were a blur, a constant reminder of the life she was now part of. She had everything she could ever want, except the certainty that she was meant to be here. She heard the soft click of footsteps behind her and turned to find Vincent standing in the doorway. His gaze was soft, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, "what's going on?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know, Vincent," she said, her voice quiet. I don't feel like I'm cut out for this. This world. I don't know if I belong here." Vincent stepped closer, his presence as commanding as always, but there was a gentleness in the way he approached her. "Emily, you do belong here," he said softly, taking her hands in his. "I wouldn't have brought you into this world if I didn't believe in you. You have everything it takes to be a part of this. To be by my side." She shook her head, her eyes welling with emotion. "I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I can keep up with everything you've built." Vincent's expression softened, and he reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I've built this life, Emily. But it's not just mine anymore. It's ours." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her heart skip a beat. She looked up at him, searching his eyes for the reassurance she needed. "You don't have to do this alone," he continued, his voice steady. "I'm here. And I'll always be here. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be with me. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had spent so long trying to fit into this world, trying to prove that she belonged, but in that moment, she realized that Vincent wasn't asking her to be anyone else. He was asking her to be herself. And that was enough. I'm with you, she whispered, her voice steady now. Vincent smiled, a small but genuine smile, and pulled her into his arms. That's all I need to hear, he said, his voice filled with relief. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily realized that this was the life she had chosen. She didn't know what the future held, but with Vincent by her side, she was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. The next few days passed in a haze of decisions and preparations. Emily found herself more deeply involved in Vincent's world, but something felt off. The weight of everything, the power, the expectations, the constant pressure, was starting to wear on her. She had made her choice, but she wasn't sure she was truly ready for what lay ahead. Vincent had given her everything, but in return, he had asked for her trust and loyalty, and those were things she wasn't sure she could offer so freely. She had never been one to rush into anything, but this world didn't give her the luxury of time. As the days turned into nights filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and people who constantly tried to undermine her position, Emily found herself questioning everything. She had come here to be with Vincent, to stand by his side, but she wasn't sure if she had the strength to withstand the weight of the life he had built. It was one evening, after a particularly exhausting day, when Emily found herself standing at the edge of the balcony, the cool breeze tousling her hair as she stared out at the city below. The lights of the buildings reflected her thoughts, bright, busy, and full of promise, but with an underlying emptiness that she couldn't ignore. Vincent appeared behind her, as he often did, his presence so familiar that she could sense him without looking. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, letting the silence stretch between them. I'm not sure if I'm strong enough for this, Emily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can keep up with everything you've built. Vincent's expression was unreadable, but she could feel his eyes on her, weighing her words. He stepped closer, the warmth of his presence enveloping her. Emily, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, I didn't ask you to carry the weight of this world alone. I asked you to be with me. You don't need to be like me, you just need to stand beside me. That's all I've ever asked. Emily felt the tears threaten to spill, but she held them back. I know you didn't ask me to do it alone, but sometimes it feels like I'm drowning, she admitted. I'm not sure where I fit in, or if I even belong here. Vincent reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. You belong with me, Emily. You are my partner, and you always will be. The world may be complicated, but together, we'll face it. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to trust me and trust us. His words settled over her like a comforting blanket. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in days, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't just asking for her loyalty. He was offering her his. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was the life she had chosen. She had made the decision to be with him, to face whatever came their way, and now she had to trust that she could handle it. I'm with you, she said softly, her voice filled with more certainty than she had felt in a long time. Vincent smiled, the warmth of his gaze making her heart race. That's all I need, Emily, he said, pulling her closer, his embrace a silent promise that no matter what came next, they would face it together. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily realized that while the future was uncertain, there was one thing she was sure of, she wasn't alone anymore. And that was all she needed. Emily sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The city sprawled beneath her, alive and bustling, yet here in the quiet of the penthouse, everything seemed still. It had been weeks since she had fully committed to being with Vincent, and the weight of her decision was starting to feel like something she could carry. She wasn't alone in this world anymore. She had Vincent, and he had her. But despite the peace she felt when they were together, the undercurrent of tension in Vincent's world never fully disappeared. There were still whispers behind closed doors, still those who doubted her place in this life. And sometimes, Emily could feel the weight of their stares. But with Vincent by her side, she was beginning to feel stronger. He had shown her so much more than she ever imagined, but she was starting to see how deep the shadows of his world ran. She wasn't just his partner in love, but in everything. That thought was both empowering and terrifying. One evening, Vincent returned from a long meeting, his presence filling the room the moment he stepped inside. He walked over to her, his usual confident stride faltering slightly as he noticed the look on her face. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, his eyes searching hers for any signs of worry. Emily smiled, though the uncertainty in her chest still lingered. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything. About us. About this life. I feel like I'm starting to understand more of it, but there's still so much I don't know." Vincent paused, his expression unreadable for a moment before he walked over and sat beside her. He took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "I never expected you to understand everything right away," he said. "But I need you to trust me, Emily. You're already a part of it. And together, we'll figure out the rest." Emily's heart swelled at his words. He had always been clear with her, this was his world, but now it was theirs. "I trust you," she said quietly, the certainty in her voice stronger than before. "But what if it's too much? What if I can't handle the pressure, the people who don't believe in me?" Vincent turned to her, his gaze steady and calm. "You're stronger than you think," he said gently. "You've already proven that. This world may be hard, but we're facing it together. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be with me, and we'll handle whatever comes our way." Emily squeezed his hand, her resolve growing. She had made